again, one of the things I've seen in final expense specifically, it's probably true for all insurance products out there or sales processes, is the pre-qualifying process is the most botched and screwed up part of the presentation. Very few agents effectively, and it takes a long time in my experience, get the pre-qualifying right. And so that's the purpose of this, is to identify where those mistakes manifest and then do some training on how to prevent them from happening. So again, if you're watching this, you're not final expense, I want you to be thinking about, what do I do in my presentation that determines if this person's a good fit or not? No matter what it is that you sell, what is their need, what is their want, what is their circumstances that you have to have met in order for this person to buy from you or not. There may be circumstances where there's conditions of doing business or you don't get the sale, but it's stuck on something. Think about that. And the great thing is you can address that instead of at the end of the presentation, right at the beginning, okay? And save your valuable time so you can spend more time with your good prospects that actually will buy. Okay, so probably the biggest problem with pre-qualifying is that some people just frankly don't do it at all, like I talked about. They go into that straight pitch, no pre-qualifying, or it's basically just very surface level. There just isn't a lot of time spent on, you know, figuring out if the prospect's qualified or not. Again, more pressure, and for me personally, the higher the pressure, the higher the pressure internally, not just exhibited to the prospect, but there's a lot of pressure put on you when you don't even know who you're dealing with and why they would buy and why they should care, and you got to grovel, you got to beg, everything I mentioned. It's more frustrating. More frustration ends to failure. So hopefully the thing here is, like, you got to understand, you got to do some pre-qualifying to bring yourself back into the mode of spending your time usefully, so you're not wasting it with the tire kickers and whatnot. So that's number one. Make sure you are doing it. If you're not doing it at all, this is like perfect, because we're going to go over the big stuff here. Now, number two is doing it half pregnant, okay? So, you know, half pregnant is like sort of, kind of, you know, I guess you really can't be half pregnant, but you can pre-qualify surface level or not very well. And again, this is a common new agent thing that I see happen, that if the agent doesn't take the time to understand how to pre-qualify and the depth that's necessary, you're not really pre-qualifying. You're getting those like tip of the iceberg answers that don't really reveal the gravity of the situation to get them to buy. So one of the things I think the most common mistake in pre-qualifying, above all the mistakes we're going to talk about, is not really getting deep into the need and the want, okay? You have to know what is driving this prospect to buy an insurance policy, okay? Nobody just sits around, like in final expense, waits for 70 years, and then has a eureka moment, I need to buy, okay? It just doesn't spontaneously come out of nowhere. There is an inflection point in the client's life that draws them toward the need and the desire to own life insurance or any insurance, okay? And what happens is, I like to think about this, if you think of a graph and you think of the arc of the person's line on the long side, and then at the top of the graph is where the client buys, you can see in the beginning, sometimes years in the past, something happens. There's an inflection point where now the interest starts, and it builds and builds and builds over time until it climaxes, hopefully around the time that you sell them something, right? But there's that inflection point is the important point here. There's something that happens early on in the client's life that changes, or early on in the past, you know, maybe a year or two ago or whatever, that changes their perspective on how they think about insurance. And for us in the final expense space, it's typically a loved one dying. It's a spouse, it's a friend, it's a family member. And the experience of either being prepared, or in most cases in final expense, absolutely not being prepared. And every time there's that inflection point, there is an accompanying story. There's emotion. It could be anger, frustration, relief, peace of mind, depending on if they are prepared or not. And that emotion, that experience, is why they're even talking to you in the first place. Every single prospect that's out there that fills a card out, that replies to a mailer or something like that, you know, something online, There's that story. You have to get to that story. Not just like on a surface level. Like, did you lose somebody to death? Is that why you sent this in? Yeah, great. No, that's just the beginning, okay?